don't think I've said this, and because I get questions about Zach, but I don't think I've said this yet about like he's the perfect quarterback for the New York market because he doesn't hear any of it. Like he could care less, and like he'll see it and he'll be like, I'm like, isn't this so funny? They talked about how I threw 2 interceptions today. Haha, I'll get better. Like
That's amazing.
his mindset is like he's literally wired like that. Like he does not care what anybody thinks,
Wow.
and it's so cool. And so like that's why I say he's like the perfect fit because like everything is like he's so internally motivated that like no matter what you write, it's just writing to him.
What's going on, Jets fans? Don't worry, James is here. We're all here. And you guys are too in high demand. It's great to be here. And welcome to episode 43 of MYJ today. Marcus Williams wears number 43, right?
He does.
Oh, and my God, look, you've got a freaking awesome shirt.
Yeah, my sister created a little merch for me, so it's pretty cool.
That is extremely cool looking. The logo is sick.
Thanks.
Yeah, absolutely, man. So we've got a bunch of people in here. Steven Engel is here. Logan Hall. He is saying greetings. Good to have you, buddy. We've got Colt Bruning. If I'm pronouncing your name wrong, I do apologize. Jared is here. Rick Fisher is here. Matthias Simon is here. Grant Rude is here. So the show can begin. And so we will begin right away. We've got a bunch of mailbags this week, which was awesome. Some weeks it's dry, some weeks it's a ton of mailbag, and that's what we got this week. So lots of discussion, and we will get right to it. We're not going to waste any time. As always, guys, if you want to have your questions or your takes heard, that is the easiest way to get it right in at the beginning of the show, because that's typically what we do. We go right to our mailbags. So I'm on Twitter. You can follow me on Twitter, and you can, look out for those mailbag tweets. And then I also put them on the community tab on the channel. So if that's something you're interested in, just keep the lookout for it. Okie dokie. Let's get started here. The first mailbag is from Blunted Vegas 702. And he is asking us a question. He says, who is Zach Wilson's backup? Rumors of Wentz to Jets. And I assume he's thinking ahead here that maybe the Colts are done with him. And he says that Joe has a connection with Carson, and he says this is a little bit scary. So let's start it off. What do you think? Who will end up being his backup?
Yeah, so I know we're going to do the free agency dive, but I can see it being Joe Flacco.
Yep.
I could see it being Joe Flacco for the reason being I think we can get him on probably a little bit of a cheaper deal. I think the Mike White situation, correct me if I'm wrong, I think he's a restricted free agent, which means we would have to tender him. And I think based on the round that you tender him with it also determines his salary. So, ultimately, what are you willing to, if you don't want to lose Mike White and you put like that second or third round tender on him, that can kind of increase his, his salary. And I would love Mike White to get paid as much money as he possibly can. But I think they will go with the veteran presence with Joe Flacco, not put the tender on Mike White, and then ultimately find it, when Joe Flacco retires, you find your backup elsewhere. I hope it's not going to be Carson Wentz.
Yeah, I think that would be a mistake. They would have to pay him more money, and that just seems like a waste. I would certainly vie for Flacco, and I would even do it ahead of Mike White just slightly. I think that they kind of showed their cards there. Like the first sign of failure from Mike White, they were like, okay, you're done. Joe Flacco, go in there and do your thing. So I think that's what they want. I think they want him to be the backup. And again, I mentioned it in a video. I think that I think they got along pretty nicely. There were some nice pictures of them just like hanging out. So I think that's the plan, and I think they're gonna hopefully they'll re-sign him sooner rather than later. But no rush, because I don't think there's like a huge market for Joe Flacco's services right now either.
Right.
All right, thank you, Blunted Vegas, for the mailbag, and we're gonna go to the next one. And this is from Caden Smith. He sent one last week, so thank you again, Caden, for sending back-to-back weeks. He says, this is just a question. He says, debate if the Cowboys release DeMarcus Lawrence and the Jets sign him. Would that persuade you into not drafting an edge in the first round? Or would you still try to snag somebody like a Carl Laftis or a Kayvon Thibodeau? This I thought was kind of interesting, actually, because it's not completely insane that the Cowboys make some moves and maybe some surprise cuts happen. I'll let you go on it first. What are your thoughts on how you would address edge if that move was made?
Yeah, so if we do end up with DeMarcus Lawrence, we'll use him specifically, and it's because the Cowboys cut him. Again, I'm not familiar with his contract in terms of, right, because we always see the numbers, and and like I have friends, and it's so friends, we talk football all the time, and you sign someone to like a huge deal, and you're like, yeah, no, we'll just cut them and we'll move on, and it's like, well, the dead cap hit if you potentially cut someone is a huge factor. And so, is there an incentive there that the Cowboys could cut him and save a ton of money? If that's the case, we wind up with him as a free agent, and you would expect it would be on a shorter term, small money deal. So if we wind up with DeMarcus Lawrence in the premise that it's a short term, low money, low risk kind of deal there, and Kayvon Thibodeau is still there at 4, I wouldn't be so quick to just move on from a guy like Kayvon Thibodeau, because you do have to think about more than just 2022. You think about it down the line. So I wouldn't let it discourage me from taking Kayvon Thibodeau. But if Kayvon Thibodeau is not there and we do have DeMarcus Lawrence, I would look elsewhere in that situation. So ultimately what I'm trying to say is Kayvon is the guy that we should look at if he's there at 4, even if we sign a guy like DeMarcus Lawrence.
Yeah, it shouldn't. I agree, and I won't spend much time on it, but basically I think that it's smart to invest in as many really, really talented edge rushers as possible. So if somebody shakes free like a DeMarcus Lawrence, I do think it wise to go get somebody like that. That opportunity doesn't present itself all that often. And I think there's some comments in here. People are saying like, let's not throw the bag at him. I think I agree. Don't go crazy here. But he's a proven commodity in the National Football League. He's a good pass rusher. And Burnt Ice is kind of asking, well, they're not that much over the cap. I guess the idea here is that if they want to keep Dalton Schultz, if they decide to do that, even if it was just to re-sign him, they're going to need to make some moves to retain. And I mean, they may not cut him. They may move on from Amari Cooper. There's a million different directions they can go in. So I do think the question is interesting. And I do think that I would say I agree with you. Let's keep investing in the pass rush. It's just too important.
Absolutely.
All right. Thank you, Caden, for the mailbag, my man. This is awesome. All right, we got Jared in the house. He's here watching us live, and he's got a mailbag here. He says the Jets re-sign LDT and Moses. They sign Justin Reed, the Texans safety, in free agency. The draft comes around, and Ekwonu goes number 1. Hutchinson goes 2. Thibodeau goes 3. What are you doing at pick number 4? And so... go ahead. You can answer it.
That said, Ekwonu went number 1, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, yeah, that's a problem. Only because I mean, Evan Neal is still a top prospect in my opinion. I feel like he's getting a little heat through Twitter, and not that I'm biased or anything, but he does have a lot to work on. But that's the case with all of these guys. There's not that real perfect player this year, which is fine. I probably wouldn't go Neal. So what I'm going to say in that situation there, I'm going with Sauce Gardner at 4 then. You know what? Because I'm looking at this thing in however many, and John, right? I was thinking about it before. The last two mock drafts that we did on this show here, we like just automatically took Aquanu at 4, and it's like, all right, well, that's what's available to us. I guess we'll improve the offensive line. And it's like, all right, well, if he's gone, you know, who else is going to be there? And if we, if we got the safety spot, we feel good in the offensive line. You know what? I feel good taking Sauce at 4 with the skills that he has. So that would be my pick.
The NYJ Today community is pro Hamilton.
Yeah, they are, huh?
It's incredible. So when you go on Twitter, there's like a sector of people that are pro drafting a safety at 4, and it seems like there's a good amount of people that would be willing to support that move. Joe Grana is saying Sauce would be sick, honestly, and I think he means that in a positive way.
Good.
And I think that's not a crazy thing to suggest. We've seen cornerbacks go early in NFL drafts. You're banging the drum for him, and I need to do more of my own, investigating on him. We'll probably do a cornerbacks exclusive episode here pretty soon. I would love to have a guy to pair with Bryce Hall, and I think that's what he offers. Mm-hmm. He offers a guy that can be the other side, and they're both big guys. I think Bryce Hall's 6'2", Ahmad's 6'3", so you'd have tall, long, athletic cornerbacks on either side. I think that's a very nice proposition. Some people are saying Garrett Wilson. That's Grant Rude's. He's been preaching about that.
Yeah, of course.
He's been preaching about it all offseason. I think he's thinking in the back of his mind is that the Atlanta Falcons, if they move on from Ridley, they may be looking at Wilson at 8. So he might not even be there at number 10. So I think that's why he's been pounding that drum, which I can respect. He did it last offseason with some takes, and he was right on in a lot of those cases. Colton Bruning, he says, you have no idea how much I want Kyle Hamilton. Well, lucky for you, it's a safety episode. We're going to do a top 10 safeties in the NFL draft tonight, so I hope you check that out. If you don't stick around the entire episode, at least check it out later. We will be doing that as we move along here. All right, we are off and running. Good start. We've still got more mailbags, so we'll keep it going. Oh, we just did that one. Sorry. So this is a question, and it's from Grant Rude, and he says, if the Jets do not grab a wide receiver via trade or free agency, who are you targeting, having Davis, Moore, Mims, Smith, and needing still at least 2 more bodies? And he's got it kind of broken down here pick by pick. Mm-hmm. And so he says, at 10, who would you prefer? And he gives the 4 names: Jamison Williams, Garrett Wilson, Drake London, Treylon Burks. 35/38, because they're pretty much the same draft slot. Bell, Olave, Dotson, Pickens, and then he throws out pick 69 as well. So I know where I would be going, and I think I know where you would be looking as well. What are your thoughts? We don't address free agency, wide receiver in free agency. We don't address it in trade. Mm-hmm. It's a big need. So what are you thinking?
Yeah, so if that's what we go into the draft with, that means that we need help, basically. We need to severely address that position there, and I would go with it at that point at 10. And you hope, right? I mean, for me, it would be Garrett Wilson, because if you're going to address it multiple times in the draft, I think you have to have a couple different flavors. And based on the options that Grant gave there, I think it would be a really cool combination to have a Garrett Wilson at 10, and then you come around at 69 and you grab a guy like Christian Watson, who has a ton of upside, who is that Drake London size, so he can be that deep ball, the high point catch threat, contested catch threat, but he's also got some speed and some wiggle to him. So that I think that would be a cool combination if you go the route runner at 10 and then the size at with Christian Watson at 69.
Yeah, it's a huge need if we ignore it in the trade market and in free agency. It is a massive need at that point. And I just want to make sure it's crystal clear here. It is one of the most widely debated positions in the entire offseason as far as who they should go after. there is a super strong sector of people that say Drake London is the man. And then there's the people that say Wilson, the route running, he's going to fit the scheme, Burks, versatility, size, speed combo. It makes me smile just because I love that about sports, just how it can be so different depending on who you're talking to. So Jared, this is a really funny comment. He says the wide receiver that I want is changes based on the video that I watched that day, which is so funny and so true.
It's so true.
All right. So my answer is that they would need to go 10. They would have to go ahead and get a wide receiver early. I've been beating the drum myself about needing to get weapons, and that would be a massive mistake if you ask me, to wait and not do it beforehand. They need to address it before the draft. I think that would be a mistake. They should definitely go after a free agent. And I've been saying let's trade for Ridley all offseason, and I won't back down off of that one. So I'm going to stand firm on that. We've got somebody asking for a Carl Loftus breakdown next week. So there you go. something to think about there. I know that Jets X Factor has breakdowns of Carl Loftus, so check that out if you haven't. Yep. They definitely do a ton of film breakdowns for sure. All right, film breakdown. We're going to continue along here. And this is similar. Wide receiver at 10, it's from Jared. Again, Jared is the man, just loading it up with the mailbags. He says, I know a lot of people want Wilson or Burks, but since we all expect the Jets to sign or trade for a good wide receiver, does it make sense for them to draft one in the top 10, especially in a deep class? And I'll answer that one. I think that if we do address it in free agency and trade, you might be right, Jared, that it might not make sense for them to use a top 10 pick on the receiver position. What do you think? If they go and get a Ridley, or if they sign Godwin, just for example, what are your thoughts? I think they should pivot at that point.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Because you have to think at that point, you've already spent massive capital, whether it's to trade and pay Ridley or pay Chris Godwin. So at that point, at 10, I'm pivoting to something else, and then I'm looking at one of these guys at the later rounds, and the mid to later rounds, because I think our last pick is in the 5th round, so which is pretty interesting. So I would pivot to the mid to late rounds there.
Yep, for sure. Let's see. Grant Ridge says, if the Jets trade for Ridley, my wide receiver hopes expectations would change completely. Yeah, if they make a move like that, a Godwin or a Ridley, and to some degree, maybe even if they go and they get Allen Robinson, that would probably also change how they look at that top 10 pick, I would think.
Right.
So it's interesting. And we are not that far away now. Free agency is pretty close, which is cool.
It's like a couple weeks, no?
Yeah, it's like 2.5 weeks, something like that. It's pretty close. All right, let's move it along here. This is a good question, just straightforward. I love questions like this. Who are some players that you love in rounds 2 through 3, and then a top guy that you have in free agency? I'll let you go first. Guys that you like in round 2/3, and then free agent, top guy at your list.
Yep. So the top free agent at my list is Marcus Williams. I'll get that out of the way now, and we'll talk about that. But he's my top free agent. I have a little bit of a thing for the secondary, as everybody knows, and I think for him, creates turnovers, right? And he's consistently healthy. It's going to cost us some money. That's okay. But consistently healthy. A veteran in the league. He's only going to be 26 when the season starts next year. So if we do give him a longer term deal, we don't have to worry about the age. So he's my number one free agent to get in this free agent class. And then rounds 2 to 3, I kind of want to go quickly back to the secondary, right? So if we don't get a Marcus Williams and we need, and say we don't draft Kyle Hamilton, which it seems like some of these guys would be in an uproar if that didn't happen. One of my guys, and we'll talk about him, is Jalen Pitre from Baylor, safety. So if we can, if he's sitting there in rounds 2 or 3, if he's sitting there in round 3, I think it's a slam dunk there. A Zion Johnson in round 2 at the 35 pick, if he's there, That's a guy that they should hone in on, especially if free agency doesn't go well across the offensive line, or all they do is bring back LDT. So a Zion Johnson, a Jalen Pitre, Jahan Dotson, if he's there, those are some of those guys that could potentially have that Elijah Moore drop into the second round, but ultimately feel like first round talents.
Nice. I'm going to say guard / center James Daniels. He probably tops my list. I would really like to, I think I've been saying that for a while now. I would prefer to go O-line in free agency, go get a guy. The contracts would line up, and I don't want to be redundant here, but if you think about it, if they go and sign James Daniels to a 3-4 year deal, when his contract is nearing its end, AVT would be up for his big payday. And so I think the time is now to go get a veteran. Oh, he's not really that old. He's only like 25 years old. But I think now is the time to spend on a free agent offensive lineman because of where the contracts are in regards to the players they just drafted at the O-line. So he absolutely is at the top of my list. He's not elite by any means as a guard, but he's a very solid, very decent guard, and young, would fit the scheme perfectly. So I'm going to stay firm on that one. He's definitely at the top of my list. I'm hoping he hits free agency. Laken Tomlinson would also be my second guard that I would want to go after. Colton, I agree completely. I still put him number 2 just because of the age gap there. I think he's going to be 29.
Yeah, he is.
Yeah, and I think Daniels will be 25 this season. But he's also a great fallback option. If you can't get Daniels, Laken Tomlinson's great. And then draft picks, I'm going to say Cameron Thomas again for the millionth time, San Diego State edge / interior lineman. This is a all gas, no brakes D lineman, can play all over the line, and a motor to kill for. This guy just does not stop. He's a relentless pass rusher, and I love that about him, the versatility I love. I also really like David Bell. I sent out a tweet earlier in the week. Some people think he's going to slip in the draft after the combine, and that could be the case, I guess, if he runs a poor 40. But he's a football player, and he's a good route runner. And although he doesn't have elite speed, that was one of the things that Jericho Cotchery didn't have when he was coming out. I think it was NC State with Phillip Rivers. He and Phillip Rivers connected.
Yeah.
His problem was elite speed. He was just a good wide receiver, and I think that's what David Bell is. So I'm going to say David Bell, Cameron Thomas. Those are my 2 guys in rounds 2 through 3. There's many, many more. There's a bunch of pass rushers in that range, and there's also some safeties in that range. Yeah. The guy that I'm starting to get turned on to right now is Daxton Hill. And the versatility is ridiculous. The athleticism is insane with him. I read a report, and I've been doing my scouting report reading. Somebody said that he could possibly be in the 4.2s in the 40-yard dash, which I don't know if I don't know if he's going to do that. But if he's not a 4.2 guy, they're pretty confident he's a 4.3 guy, which is crazy. Go ahead. Sorry.
He was one of those big time high school recruits. So I mean, he's been good at football his entire life. He's if I'm not mistaken, he was a 5-star coming out. And the only reason I do know that is I believe he decommitted from Alabama and ended up at Michigan, or he decommitted from Michigan, had some thoughts about going to Alabama, and then he recommitted to Michigan, one of those two. But so he's been good at football his entire life there. So he's one of those guys that is just kind of super rare. He has been on the scene for a little while there now, and he really kind of came out this year for Michigan, which is pretty cool. And another one too, just to throw out, names are just starting to come in my head, like a Perion Winfrey, right? Like, are we looking for interior D-line help? Are we okay with just having, Quinnen Williams and Sheldon Rankins, or, is a Perion Winfrey sitting there at 38 after, what he's done this offseason in at Oklahoma? Is he a pick that, obviously the staff got to take a look at during the Senior Bowl? But yeah, so a ton of names out there, and you're right about David Bell, 100% right, because not everyone needs to show up to the combine looking like DK Metcalf. It's just listen. I mean, Cooper Cup walked into the scouting combine. I'm sure he didn't turn heads. I mean, I can't remember or be sure, but just a heck of a football player, and so not everyone has to be a combine hero in order to succeed at that next level. So if he's a guy that could fall and they really like his game and his route running, yeah, that could be a home run pick.
Good point. There's so many examples of that where guys just don't perform all that great at the combine and they have great careers. The guy I always refer to is Anquan Bolden.
Yep.
Freaking baller that guy was. Tough as nails. Lasted a long time in the National Football League. And who's the Raven Terrell Suggs. Was that the he fell to like 10 or something. And he was an absolute monster in college football and fell because of like some sort of like not great combine or pro day or something. He was a monster though. My God. This is an interesting comment from Boycott Activision. Good to have you here. Don't recognize your name, but happy to have you. He says, Zach does not need Fort Knox. He needs targets. Draft a right guard in the second round. That's why I want to go in free agency and go get a guard, because then you can use some of those assets on other needs. All right, let's keep it going. By the way, you guys are just loading it with questions. So I'm a little bit grumpy right now. You got to follow me on Twitter and send these daggone questions that you have in the mailbag, because then I can really sort through and pick the best ones. That would be the preferred method here, guys. All right, let's keep it moving. We got two more mailbags here. This is from Terrence Begley. And he said, great hearing you on Spaces last night. I hopped into a Twitter Spaces a couple of times on Twitter with... Brooklyn. I don't know if you're familiar with him. He does a lot of card giveaways on Twitter. Yeah. And I hopped on with him, and he was leading a really good discussion. And that was super cool. I got to talk with, Jets Central was on there. I don't know if you're familiar with him. He's one of the goats of the YouTube verse. And so that was really cool. But anyway, he says, great hearing you on Spaces last night. I liked the talk around perhaps moving up from 35 to perhaps get somewhere in the late first round. How do you feel about that? And he's saying, what position or player would be the target? A lot of people get grumpy when we talk about this, and I don't see why, because I know we have holes, blah, 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 blah. I mean, I'm not trying to say that's not true, but if Joe Douglas sees somebody falling, the history has proven that, well, not his entire history, but recent history has proven he will go and aggressively go get somebody if they start to slip. So I don't think it's outlandish. What would you be moving up for? What player, what position? And again, it's hard to know because we don't know what the first round's going to look like, but maybe a guy that is expected to be in that range.
Yeah, I'll go right back to Zion Johnson, because I do think he's that player that he will be there in the 20s. It's just a matter of, I don't know if we're going to get Elijah Moore, Michael Carter lucky that we could just sit in the green room and just pray that he's there at 35. Like someone made that, one of the guys at Jets X Factor made that comment to me the other day, and was just, if you really like someone, go up and get them, because we're not always going to have that ability to just say, okay, we'll sit here and pray that he's there at our selection. Joe Douglas accumulated all of this draft capital, not just to pick 1,000 players over 3 years. It's so that he has flexibility, and he did it with Elijah Vera Tucker last year. And so he gave himself this flexibility. So if there is someone there, I mean, it is really hard to tell, right? Because we're like at this moment, we're all about the big names, right? Like I had a lot of trouble today with my top 10 safeties, or over the weekend with my top 10 safeties, because it's like we know the big names, but like who are these other guys that are going to show up, after the combine and as the draft really starts to kind of heat up here, and also what does free agency look like? What positions, does Joe Douglas take on free agency to the point where we could just go into the draft and not know what the heck is going to happen, which would probably be the most ideal situation for me anyway. This way, we're not just saying, okay, we need to pick this player for that reason. We need to pick this player because he plays this position and we have to pass on this guy, etc. So ultimately, yeah, I mean, it's hard to tell, but I will put Zion Johnson back in that list because we do need the guard help. And if we can't fill it in free agency, it needs to be filled in some form or fashion.
Yes, Zion Johnson is a big time player that I would really be interested in. Again, if they don't make the move for James Daniels or, um, re-signing LDT or even signing the guy from 49ers, name is slipping my mind right now.
Lakin.
Lakin, thank you, Tomlinson. Yeah, they definitely should be. They should be willing to move up, and that's what Nick says right here. Nick Russo, he says we have the chips, we have the flexibility. There's no reason to, refuse a slight jump up. We're not talking about some massive trade up here to get into the end of the first round. We're at pick 35, and you couple that with some of your other 4th, 5th round picks and future picks you can use as well. We're not talking about mortgaging the future by making a move into round 1. So I agree with you. I think it's worth it if a guy that you really covet falls. Somebody, and I think it was Jared, this is an interesting thought. If Jameson Williams, if he slides to let's say 26, 27, something like that, that's going to be really, really intriguing for any team. And my goodness, that would be awesome if we could jump up into the late first round. I don't think that it's a massively risky move either, because we all kind of agree that if he didn't suffer that knee injury, he's probably wide receiver 1, consensus. And then it wouldn't be so much debate on Twitter and on YouTube and all the social media platforms. So I don't know, man, that would be pretty freaking awesome. The thought of that makes me excited to think about if we see that fall, just a slight fall. Because I mean, that's the other thing. Where is he going? We don't know where he's going, man. So if he goes mid first round, we're not going to get him. But if he falls a little bit into those 20s range, man, that would be a hell of a haul to land whatever we get at 4, whatever we get at 10. That's pretty cool to think about. So thank you. Go ahead.
What if I think Pittsburgh's at 20. What if Pittsburgh makes the move for a quarterback and it's that Justin Fields? Right, that's exactly kind of where I'm going to go, where Joe's going here, and kind of mix in Jameson Williams there too. Is all right if we get our guy. Let's just say Kayvon falls to 4, and we take Kayvon at 4, and then Pittsburgh presents us with a package that is hard to turn down. And there's certain guys at that spot where we're like, all right, we can afford to move down here. We'll take the chance. We gain a first round pick in 2023. And we're sitting there at 20, and Jameson Williams is on the board, right? Drake London's gone, Treylon Burks is gone, Garrett Wilson's gone, and now Jameson Williams is staring you in the face. And there's going to be more access this year to these players. We talked last draft a little bit about how assets in 2022 were so valuable because we're not going to be in this COVID. We're still in the COVID world, but it's not as stringent as it was last year. So at the combine, they're going to get the medical work done. They're going to see these guys a little bit more in person. And if they're like, hey, the ACLs, yes, it's a big injury, but guys are continuously coming back from those more often now. Do you move back? And what if Jameson Williams is sitting there at 20 staring you in the face, and you feel confident that he could become fully healthy in the middle of his rookie season?
Yeah. We don't expect the Super Bowl next year. And there's definitely a large portion of fans that don't even really expect the playoffs, which I don't think is something we can completely rule out. But man, that's a move for the the middle of the season, but also for the future. That's a huge potential game changer for our offense, getting a guy with that kind of speed. So I am all in on that move. We had a question in the chat, and it was related to George Pickens. I want to try to pick that one out. Frank, he says, what's your thought on George Pickens as an option at 35? Shucks. That might be a little early for me. I have him as the 7th wide receiver in the class. What are your thoughts on George Pickens?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit early, and I hate to keep playing the same game, but it's like, all right, well, what happens to a guy like a Chris Olave, right? People feel like he's not getting his due in kind of the draft talk here. So at 35, if you have options at 35, I'm not sure I would go with George Pickens at 35. I think he's a talented player. I don't disregard that aspect of it, but he has been injured. He hasn't really played all that much college football. You're betting on the traits at that point in time. You're betting on the talent, moving over to a healthy NFL player that can make a difference. And so I probably wouldn't go at 35 with George Pickens. And listen, I don't know. He may show up to the combine and people are like, "Holy crap!" That's a total possibility. But at this point in time, I'd probably stand pat on that one.
Yeah, I'm not too comfortable with taking him at 35. I wouldn't rule it out completely, but the big thing with him is you saw the injury, and then also the production just kind of drops. Like it started out, he was looking really good, and then it just every year it got worse and worse. That doesn't necessarily mean he can't work out in the NFL. But seeing the production slip year after year is a little bit concerning. Dotson is a guy that I really like. So I see that name in the chat, and I do agree with that. All right, we got our last mailbag here. Let's go to it. This is from Cali Jets. He's been submitting, it seems like weekly mailbags. So thank you, Cali, if you're watching this. He says, the Jets open free agency, and they sign Connor Williams, the guard from the Cowboys, and safety Quandre Diggs from the Seattle Seahawks, both around $10 million per year. Does this change your mindset at 4? Ekwonu or Neal seem less likely because of the move that we made for adding Connor. So he says, with likely no holes on the O-line and safety definitely out of the picture. So does this change our mindset? I think that it would probably rule out the move for Kyle Hamilton, but I don't know. We need 2 safeties.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not sure if it's completely out the window. And then depending on the contract they give Connor, the guard, I don't know. That's a hard one to answer. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think it would depend on how they view Ekwonu, right? Because if they put Connor Williams at the right guard, presumably, I think the left guard spot's pretty handled down. If they view him as a guy who can step in right now and play right tackle, and it could be the right tackle for the next 10 years, I don't necessarily think that rules out an offensive line pick. And I don't think it rules out a safety pick either, just because of who Kyle Hamilton is, right? He's obviously, I think there's a very large gap between, that 1 and 2 safety there. So I wouldn't rule out either positions again on the offensive line, only because what both of Ekwonu and Neal could potentially provide you at right tackle if, and I know George Fant is there and everything, but he's not going to be there forever. So you kind of have to think about the future as well.
And if he's watching this right now, he's probably like punching his pillow or something. The fact that Kyle Hamilton's not ruled out, because he is very against.
He's against it, yeah.
He is very much against the idea of adding Hamilton. I won't rule it out. I am not a diehard supporter of that move at all, because I think the better value is round 2 or 3 with some of the guys that we're going to be talking about tonight. That completes the mailbag. And I will do a much better job of paying attention to our live stream, our live chatters right now. Big Al is supporting what you said. He says, come on, man. The Jets can get Sauce at 10. I guess he's mad at you because you said take him at 4.
Hey, man, you never know.
And Bill is agreeing with you. Sauce needed. Listen, guys, I really just wanted to say thank you. There's a bunch of people in here right now. So if you have not hit that like button, go ahead and consider doing that right now for me. And again, follow us on Twitter. We're both on there. You can follow me. The name is on the screen. Back Shoulder Breakdowns is James' Twitter handle, so follow him on Twitter as well. And we're going to go ahead and we're going to get into it now. So go ahead and fill up the chat as you always do. And we're going to go ahead and get to our very first topic of the night. It's an easy one, I think, but it should get people a little fired up, which is really what I'm after here. The Sun God, he's coming back. He's going to return to the New York Jets. Have you heard? Robby Anderson, there was a rumor that came out, and it basically said he misses the Jets. He wants to come back. He likes Zach Wilson as a quarterback. And he wants to finish what he started in New York. Chat, fill it up. Tell me what you think about a move for Robby Anderson. You can say yes or no. You can tell me yes or no and include a reason. That would be great. James, what are your thoughts on a move to bring back the Sun God?
So I wrote down some notes here because I wrote down notes for everything. But like I wanted to make certain points clear because I think – right, like when we're looking at the wide receiver position in terms of making trades, I do think the financials are, the money is really something that's important to take into account here. He's going to be 29 in May, so he's going to be 29 when he starts the season. Carolina gave him a 2-year, $29.5 million extension in August of 2021 after he had 95 catches. In 2020, so they kind of threw him that extension. So his 2022 cap hit is $16.8 million, which I think is high, if we're being honest. I know it's not the highest for the wide receiver spot, but I do think that's high. And it doesn't necessarily really go down as 2023 is $15.8 million. There's an out there for the dead cap after 2022. So he can be cut after 1 year if it doesn't work out. But then you look at it in terms and say, what do we have to give up for him draft-wise? If his cap hit is $16.8 million and I could potentially have a situation where I need to walk away from him after 1 year, I'm not giving a first, second, or a third. That's not where I would go with it. And he had like a really weird transition when he went to Carolina. I took down the numbers here from 2016 to 2019 with the Jets. He had an average catch yard. His yards per catch were 14, 14.9, 15, and then 15. So like we labeled him as a deep threat, right? Mm-hmm. This guy that we were like, hey, we're not going to pay a lot for when he comes up in free agency because he's a one-trick pony type of guy, right? That's what the argument was. We could just get someone else to do the same thing. And then he goes to Carolina, and he's got 95 catches in 2020, and it was only for 11.5 yards. So he turned his game into a little bit something different, which was good for him. I think that's why they paid him the money. Was he was the deep threat and then also the short to intermediate type of receiver also. And so his value went up really high. And then in 2021 last year, the whole thing just tanked and he was at 9.8 yards per catch. He's only got, I think it's 8 touchdowns in 2 years as a Panther. So I know the quarterback situation that he had wasn't great last year, but ultimately at the cap hit and also having to give up draft capital to get him in something that Carolina may want to be a premium pick, I would steer clear and go somewhere else other than – and he was great for – we loved Robby when he was here. It's nothing against him as a person, but I think there are different roads to go down that can put us in a better spot than that one.
You went off on that one. You did a really good job with that one, and a lot of information there. So if you guys didn't know, a lot of that stuff, that was very well done. I didn't do all of the research that you did, but I knew that it would be complicated, and that's basically the short and skinny of what you just told us. It is very complicated to make a move for Robby Anderson. So personally, am I making a move for him? I would say no. Because you are giving up an asset. It is going to eat up a lot of our cap space. and 29 years old. I mean, there's just a lot of things going on there. So most people in the chat do agree. They say no thank you, or, not nice things, no thank you. Anthony Coleman, he throws in, he says, why not? He's really, really good at contested catches, and he was reliable. And I do think that was something that a lot of people didn't mention. He was pretty good at the catch point. He was not really getting the ball knocked out of his hands when the ball was in the air. So you're not wrong for saying that, Anthony. But for all of the reasons that James laid out, it's just too doggone complicated to make this move. And there are other alternatives than, trading for him. And I'm not saying he's not a scheme fit, but I'm not sure that he is. I'm not sure that it's like the perfect fit for him specifically. Like, we could use his help, but I don't know if it's like the great fit for him. So for that reason, I am out. And so all is good. If you wanted him back, I do hope you understand that it's not just because we hate him. It's because there's just too much going on. Happy birthday, Frank Pagan.
Happy birthday, Frank.
And you got your shot out, buddy. I saw it in the chat. I said, I'm not missing this opportunity. Happy birthday, man. Hope you had a good day today. Hope you're enjoying it right now, hanging out with us. So happy birthday. All right. Nick Russo, he throws in there. He says, if they could manage to get Robby Anderson for a late round pick, the money doesn't necessarily scare me. And he says, I think that he has a skill set that we need. This is true. The only question I ask myself, and maybe it'll change in year 2, we didn't really see a lot of deep balls this season. That wasn't really a big part of our offense. And I'm not necessarily saying that Robby can't do anything else, but that is kind of like his game, is going down the field and attacking. So I don't know. I don't know if they're going to start doing that more in year 2, and then having him would be a benefit, but I'm not sure. Bill says, don't want Anderson. You can do better both with the player and the cap. Also, keep our draft picks. He's opened his mouth some. Would not be a good choice. Yeah, and another small thing, and I'm not saying that he would do this in New York with Zach Wilson. As terrible and as bad as Sam played at times last year, there's really no excuse for your wide receiver to be jawing at your quarterback like he did. And I don't know if you remember that, James, but he really just laid the hell into Sam Darnold. And if you haven't seen that, you can find that on YouTube very easily. You can just search that up. Robby Anderson yelling at Sam Darnold. You'll find it. All righty. We will move on from the Sun God, and we will go to our top 10 safeties. And for anybody that hasn't been watching the streams the last couple of weeks, we've been featuring a position in the NFL draft, and we've been basically just giving a top 10 players we like, players that maybe we aren't as high on. I have a couple of players that people have been talking a lot about, but I actually am a little down on one specific dude, and we will get into that. This is a fair point, Nick. He says, wide receivers are divas. This is fair. Anderson had DJ Moore taking all the coverage. Don't be fooled by his Carolina stats pre-Darnold. Okay, fair enough.
Yeah, I just thought, I mean, altogether, I just think for him and Darnold, because if you remember also, even when they became teammates in Carolina, when Robby signed with Carolina and Sam was still a Jet, he had made certain comments that they just did not click. And so when Carolina traded for Sam, Robby was probably like, I already did not have a good rapport with this guy. Maybe it could work, but ultimately it didn't work again. So maybe there's something there and you can unlock it. But I don't know. And I think we'll talk about it when we hit the free agency aspect.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's. I think people also have to realize it's not like we have $100 million in the bank this year either. It is a little bit more dry than I was expecting.
Our cap space, you mean?
Yeah, our cap space, right? I'm not over exaggerating that, right?
I am. I think that's one of the things that maybe isn't being talked about enough. we do not have as much money as it seems.
Oh no,
We don't, and and it's not just the number. It's like because we have 48 million right now, or it's 48 million projected, or whatever, and that's pre-cuts, and that's before you make any signings, before you re-sign any guys, and the number that we need to save for our draft is like almost $20 million. It's like 18 to 19 mil. So
yeah, right, because of the top 10 picks.
So it's not a whole lot of dough. All right. You were very kind last week, and you let me go first. I'm going to be a douche, and I'm going to make you go first this time. You don't get a choice. So why don't you give me why don't we do an opposite? We'll do something. We'll do maybe 10 to 6.
Yeah, I'm going to do that. So I structured this one differently. Okay. So maybe it is good that I go first, because I put down 8 guys and then muddled in like a whole bunch of other guys that I couldn't figure out how to make 9 or 10, or just names that I saw that intrigued me that I hadn't really looked into yet. And I was like, you know what, let me just throw a whole bunch of names at the end. Because I do really think it's that, obviously, like everything else, it really is that top 5 that is kind of pretty interesting there. So I'm going to throw out some names, and then I'll get to number 8. So one of the guys that I want to look into that I haven't looked into yet, but the numbers are crazy, and it's a small school guy from Middle Tennessee State. His name is Reed Blankenship. He played 4 or 5 years at Middle Tennessee State, but a complete tackling machine. He had 419 total tackles in his college career, which equates to some years over 100, just under 30 30 tackles for a loss. The interceptions were a little bit low, but whenever I see numbers like that, I feel like those things do not happen on accident. And so I want to look into him a little bit more. Bubba Bolden from Miami. Yeah, Blankenship is the wild numbers, and there's got to be something to it there. Bubba Bolden from Miami, a little bit more of a physical player, a bigger player, but tackling is there. So that's something that I'm kind of trying to look at towards the end or towards the end of this top here. Tyke Smith is a guy from Georgia that is, I guess, a little bit overshadowed from Lewis Cine, who I'm sure we both have relatively high up. But when you watch that Georgia defense, almost everybody stands out. So I wanted to make him a point there. So then I'll get to number 8. Number 8, I have Brian Cook at Cincinnati. So high football IQ. I studied the tape on Sauce Gardner. He flashed a whole bunch of times, and really kind of overall what I'll show in the list is with the safety spot, I want to make sure I'm getting a player that, yes, is aggressive and physical, but has that football IQ to be able to have the awareness that he's not always not always putting himself in a bad spot. And so Brian Cook, I noticed what I noticed with Brian Cook is the football IQ was high. He was always putting himself in a good spot and always had the awareness. I believe he had a pick in the against Alabama in the I forget what bowl it was, but the college football playoff there. Number 7, I'm going to go Kirby Joseph from Illinois. 6'1", 200 pounds. He had the interceptions this year. I don't believe he had any before this year, so he kind of blew up on the scene interception-wise. Now, I'm not going to kill anybody that didn't have a ton of interceptions in college because I think ultimately there's a lot of factors that come around with that. But for him, what I really like is the length that he possesses, right? Because when you have that length, and you have to get over, it gives you the range, it gets you in the passing lane. So Kirby Joseph, I put it 7 there. And then number 6, I had Verone McKinley III from Oregon. He's a cover guy who can also be a sure tackler. So I put him at that number 6 spot. I do think he might be a little bit of a smaller player, but ultimately, listen, if there's certain guys where I don't like to also get too much down on the size because I don't think it's going to be someone you're picking in the first round. So for him, when you read that he's a sure tackler, that's always a positive. Despite his size, he can play in space, etc.
Cool. Good stuff. Our lists are different, but it's okay. I think that's a good thing. Frank throws in a question. He says, do you think the Jets could convince Mosley to restructure his contract to help bring in a free agent like a Marcus Williams? When I made my my mock off season, that was one of the things that I included in it was the need to approach him. He talked about wanting to bring guys in to help turn the Jets around, and that's something that he's preached about wanting to do since he's gotten here. It's been one of the things has been consistent in saying that. I do think it's important that he be willing to bring that number down. It's at like 16 million this year. And
It's big.
It's a big contract for a linebacker, and he's a very good linebacker, but I think that he needs to be willing to change that contract up to help us out a little bit. He is the highest contract on the roster, so I'm hoping that Joe Douglas will approach him and knock it down a little bit. So I think it's realistic, and I do think that they need to do it. Whew, okay. I'm going to give my list, and I will put a disclaimer out there. I have watched most of these guys, but a lot of the things that I'm going to share, it's from reading about them. I'm planning to do more watching as time goes on. Vern throws out that I don't like McKinley's tackling. That's something that I actually have written down, and I'll get into that in just a second. So here we go. I'm going to go number 10, and I'll go all the way to 6. Number 10, I have Bubba Bolden. He lacks the elite speed. He's not a burner by any means. Change of direction could be a problem for him. This is a 6'3", 206-pound safety from Miami. NFL frame, as I just read to you, solid hitter. He's physical at the line when he's brought up from the back end, and relatively quick, not fast but quick.
Mm-hmm.
I have Cam Taylor Britt. He played cornerback for the Cornhuskers in Nebraska, but this is a guy that I think might transition from cornerback to safety. So, if you were viewing him as a cornerback in the draft, this is just, something that I read a little bit about him. So doesn't always look comfortable and natural when changing direction was one of the things that I read about him. He's not a good, doesn't work his hips all that great, doesn't turn great, plays a little high. So his hips are too high. He needs to drop his butt and play with a little bit more, I don't know what the word is, like not flexibility, but basically just to drop his base down a little bit. He has a nose for the ball, though, reacts quickly. I watched some film of him. He was making a lot of really cool interceptions, like breaking on the ball. So he certainly has the ball skills and good straight line speed. But again, change of direction could be an issue for him. And so I'm going to say, put him at free safety and see what he can do. He's 6 foot tall. He's 200 pounds. Maybe you could turn him into something. I have Verone McKinley the third at 8. Tackling is inconsistent. He's not a big dude, 5'11", 194. He has a lot of freaking turnovers to his name in his career. A lot. Like he has like 11 interceptions, 2 forced fumbles, and this was one of the guys that I watched the most of. And of the turnovers that I saw, many of them were in the right place at the right time. And what I mean by that is like the ball was deflected and in the air, he caught it. Like he was just there. The quarterback was being rushed, overthrew a receiver, and it just goes right to him. Like there was nothing, like I'm not taking away from Verone by saying this. I mean, it's just like it's there and it's pretty obvious. Like the ball was just nowhere near where it needed to go. So he loses points for me for that. He does have good awareness, though. He reacts very quickly, and he is dangerous with the ball in his hands. He makes a lot of plays with it. We got a bunch of comments in here. People throwing some interesting things in here. This is pretty cool. All right. Number 7, I have Brian Cook, the Cincinnati safety. Read and react safety, 6'1", 210 pounds. He's got dreads, so that's a positive. I put that on my list, man. This guy's got some swaggin' dreads hanging out of the back of his helmet, so that is automatically a W for me. He attacks, and the plays that I was watching of him, there was one where they did they were pulling offensive linemen to the right, and they pitched it to the right, and he just goes ape, you know what, into these offensive linemen and just completely destroyed the play. Like, he threw his body in harm's way and he ended the play very, very quickly. I loved seeing that. I think he might be a strong safety in the National Football League, which we need. But, just something to throw out there. He does lead with his shoulder a lot. Again, this is something I read, not something that I've been like watching thousands of plays of Brian Cook. But it's something that I read, and it is something that concerns me a little bit. I don't really love the idea of seeing, our safety just constantly trying to pop somebody with their shoulder. And then the last thing is, doesn't have great explosiveness, and, change of direction isn't all that great. So he's number 7. And then my number 6, this is maybe a little bit of a surprise. I have Lewis Seen here. And some people have him as high as like a 2nd round grade. So in my reading of him and watching of him, because I also watched him, bully of a hitter. He hits with tremendous thump, and he will take you out. I think I watched a play where he put Kyle Pitts on his back. I mean, he just totally destroys dudes. Reads the quarterback's eyes well. He's the leader of that Georgia defense, kind of like the quarterback of their defense. The big thing that really made me go ew a little bit was his QBR over his whole college career. Mm-hmm. It was just under 86 QBR when being targeted. And you're going to see in a little bit, I have some numbers of QBR when these guys were being targeted, and it's not even remotely that high. So if we're talking about, having moved on from Jamal Adams because he was kind of one-dimensional, not really great in coverage, I'm not real keen on the idea of having another type of situation with that. Vern. Stop it. You're 100% correct. And just sit there and take it, buddy. Just sit there and take it. But anyway, Lewis Seen, I think maybe not what I'm hoping for in a safety. I think that's concerning to see him giving up such a high number in the pass game. So there you go. Anyways, I'm gonna check the comments here.
Yeah.
Any takeaways from some of the differences while I'm reading some of these chats?
For me?
Yeah, for you or for whatever.
Yeah, apparently my source on Verone McKinley stunk.
No.
Take. No, because you're right. Like it's it's difficult because, like, I mean, I think we said this, and I wish this was my full-time job and you could watch, film on every single player. But ultimately it's very hard. So you rely on, those other sources too. A lot of this stuff I'm taking from scouting reports too, because what's available to us. Right. So yeah, no, the Verone McKinley one's good. And I'm curious to see where Kirby is for you. I know you mentioned his name. Was it maybe the Senior Bowl talk that we had that one time?
Actually, I think it was, maybe. It was before the Senior Bowl. He's a guy that I've had my eye on a little bit. I think he's a guy that the Jets might be interested in. I don't have him as high as maybe you think.
Okay. All right.
Or maybe as high as Vern thinks, I should say.
But no, yeah, no. So I think it's a good list. There was one. Who was your 10? Was it Bubba Bolden?
Bubba Bolden, yeah. And then Cam Taylor-Britt was 9.
Right. That's the one. That's the one that when I was doing he was on some cornerback list. He was on some safety list. And I've seen his name, quite a bit for Nebraska there. And I know Ryan. Is it Ryan Roberts? He runs the mock draft simulator that I recommended to you. I think he's pretty high on Cam Taylor also. So I see his name floating through Twitter here and there.
Alrighty. And a lot of people are just mostly talking to each other. And ready to rip me a new one for my Kirby Joseph ranking. All right, why don't you complete the list here? 5-1. I actually like this a little bit better, doing the 5-1 or
Yeah,
the 10-1. This is kind of cool.
Yeah, it gives it a countdown, but I think we're gonna have probably the same people in this list, but I think maybe I ruffled the feathers here a little bit. But 5, I do have Lewis Sign. You've hit on him, right? He's the aggressive player. He's gonna play the run. He's gonna look to take your head off. It's full speed all the time. He's gonna play. If he's in coverage, he's gonna be that one high. That one high safety, but there will be some issues there. But ultimately, he's going to be able to come down and play the run. He does make plays in the open field, which is exciting. He had that one highlight in the national championship, I believe. I don't think it was the SEC championship, but the national championship where he ran with was it maybe Slade Bolden in motion, and then he made the tackle for the loss. So he's a guy who you can move around. Maybe going to be that box player a little bit more. But that aggressiveness to an extent is a positive. And then ultimately in this system, we are going to need guys who can cover back there and not get beat in their zone. So I think this is where you're maybe going to get upset with me.
Maybe not.
I have Daxton Hill at 4.
Ooh. I'm mad at you.
The positives are really obviously at the top. It's the versatility. He can probably play anywhere. Anywhere there in the secondary. Where I got lost, and this is just me from reading scouting report here, where I got kind of lost was he's a gambler. He's a gambler, and he can get lost in his zone. And I don't know, I forgot where I took that one quote from, but scouting report, maybe the Draft Network, was he can get lost in the zones. And that kind of made me a little weary, and I'll have to go back and prove it for myself. But you ultimately look at what we're trying to do with these safeties is, keep everything in front of us, play your position, do your job in that regard, and don't let up the big play and come down and make the play. And he's going to be able to come down and make the plays. There's no worry about that. It's just I'm kind of curious about when someone gets lost in the zone. Is he not consistent in his assignment when he's playing the pass coverage? That could be true. It may not be true, but when I read that, it kind of puckers the ears just a little bit there.
You're uninvited to the channel. I'm just with you.
Jalen Pitre is 3 for me, and I really like this player. I mean, I've talked about, he is a 5-year player, but he's ultimately not all that old. He's going to be 23 in June, so I didn't see that as overly old for a player that is a 5th-year senior. I thought when I saw, I was like, oh my God, he's played a lot of football. He's played over 40 games at Baylor. But the stat line, the 75 tackles, the 18 and a half tackles for loss, the 3.5 sacks, the 2 interceptions, the 7 pass defense. He is 6 foot, 200 pounds. He may look a little bit smaller, but 6 foot, 200 pounds is a nice size. I do give him, and maybe this is unfair, but I do give him a little bit of a bump because I really enjoy watching Baylor play defense under Dave Arenado, who's the head coach. They're all just so physically and technically sound. They're always in the right spot. There's no busted holes in coverage. And you ultimately look at that and you say, okay, well, as the safety player, he's responsible for getting some guys lined up back there, making sure that there's no busting coverage, at least on his end. And so you can see him read, recognize, and he reacts. He can make plays behind the line of scrimmage. And ultimately, maybe man coverage, he may have some issues, but the zone coverage I think is there. And I think we'd be getting, when I look at Baylor, I feel like, and maybe this is off base, but I feel like a Buffalo, right? Buffalo Bills, the defense, they're just a collection of guys who can play football. I know you have the Tre'Davious White and Micah Hyde, and those guys are definitely, really good NFL players. But there's never any lapses in the defense other than the fact when Tyreek Hill runs directly down the field.
Good team defense.
It's just good team defense, and I think that's what ultimately the Jets are really looking for, right? Is guys to play as a collective unit, not let up the big play, keep everything in front of you, get off the field, and ultimately make big plays, impact plays when you need it on those third downs, in the red zone, etc. And I do think Jalen Pitre would fit really nicely, so I gave him that extra bump over Daxton Hill, who I think is the better athlete. I just gave the technicality aspect or the technique aspect and the awareness aspect just a little bit of a bump based on what we're looking for.
Before you move on, we got a comment on Pitre. I just thought I'd read it. Generally Jets, he says, Jalen Pitre is a perfect fit for what the Jets are looking for. They need a box safety to cover the run and those curl flats. And I feel like he is the box safety that I would prefer over a Lewis Cine. And I think it's Lewis Cine.
Yes.
That would be, if we're going to draft a box safety, I would prefer it to be somebody like him, a little bit more athletic.
Mm-hmm.
I'll go into him later though. Anyway, thank you for the comment. Generally Jets, appreciate that. You can go ahead. Sorry, I cut you off.
Yeah, no, it's perfect, and it is a good point. What generally Jets makes is because part of what part of what you read on him too is someone said he could be he could absolutely be that box safety. When you have 18 and a half tackles for loss, you're playing up there a whole heck of a lot. I mean, that doesn't happen by accident.
This is true.
And there's the question of, okay, well, where do we play him? What do we do? And basically what the scouting report said was, if you're asking yourself that question, the answer is everywhere, right? You can do a lot of different things with him. And so that's pretty intriguing there, where, on third down, we like to play that one high and man coverage, despite popular opinion. I mean, we watched it how many times throughout the year where we're playing, we're playing that man coverage with the one high safety. Could we drop a guy like him down? And if we need him to make a play in the run game, he can make that play there. And so Jalen Pitre was 3 for me. Jaquan Brickster, Penn State. Awareness, again, another theme for me. Scouting report wise, I watched the YouTube stuff on Jalen Brickster, and he kind of flashes out as a guy who can get his hands on the football. And then the scouting report is he has great awareness to do what he's supposed to be doing in pass coverage, while also being the physical player that can come up. So that is, again, I think kind of the theme of what we were looking for in terms of that awareness in pass coverage, the ability to read the routes, have the instincts, and also be able to have the versatility to come up and play the physical run game near the box if need be. And then number 1, Kyle Hamilton's the best safety in the draft. 6'4", 220 pounds. The sideline to sideline ability, the range in pass coverage. You can put him anywhere. He's the Swiss Army. I don't know if anyone has made this comparison yet, and maybe someone has. He's probably a little bit more of a traditional safety than this player. But remember when Isaiah Simmons came out of Clemson?
Yes.
Where he was that Swiss Army knife. It was like, hey, one play he's rushing the passer. The next play he's playing Ohio State, and he's making a rangy type of interception on the sideline off of a guy like Justin Fields. And so it was a question mark of, I think more so of a question mark for Isaiah Simmons of, where are we going to play this guy? Is he a linebacker? Is he a safety? I think Kyle Hamilton's definitely a safety. There's not that question mark for him, but he is a guy that you can probably legitimately do anything you want with, and he's going to excel in anything you ask him to do. Creates the turnovers, makes the impact plays. So I think we're probably in agreement there that Kyle Hamilton is the best safety in this draft by probably a wide margin.
I actually have him as my number 5, so just kidding. Grant Root, it's so weird you're saying that. I actually was going to put play it off as if I didn't even have him on my list. Exactly what you just described. Just leave him completely off the list. That's what I was thinking about when I was prepping. All right. Good stuff by you. We actually have Brisker in the same spot. I think you had Petrie 4.
I had Petrie at 3.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Oh, right. You had Daxton. That's what you did me dirty there with him. Okay. All right. So we won't waste any more time. I have Kirby Joseph at 5. Maybe it's high. Maybe I'm an idiot, and maybe he doesn't. Maybe he goes in the 6th round when it's all said and done. I like the ability that he shows to play, a little bit of everything. He's very versatile. He is not an elite athlete. He is a good athlete. The negatives are very obvious. He did not do all that much prior to 2021, but when he got his opportunity, he shined like a star at Illinois this past year. He's really good versus the run. That's one thing that I read a lot about, and maybe it's not something that a lot of people are talking about in regards to him. We see the interception numbers and we just assume, okay, he's like some rangy guy. He's versatile. He can do a little bit of everything. And I really do prefer my safeties to be able to do a little bit of everything. I don't want, I don't want them to just be in the box. I don't want them to just be back, playing deep middle every snap. I think that's a waste. So I want them to have versatility, and that's what I prioritize. So moving forward now in my top 5, I think that all 4 of these guys offer extreme versatility, and that's why they're in my top 4. I'll go kind of quick here. I have Jalen Petrie at 4, 6 foot, 196. You mentioned the size. He did have a knee injury in high school. He shook that off perfectly fine. No worries there. He does have some issues in man coverage. He looks like he's probably a box safety, but I don't see that as a complete negative. I'm not saying that you can't have, a guy that plays in the box. We've seen, Tyrann Mathieu make a lot of plays, close to the line of scrimmage. We've seen other guys do it as well. So I have no problem with him playing closer to the line of scrimmage. I just wouldn't want to spend too early of a pick on a player like that. So he's 4. Jaquan Brisker is my 3rd. I mean, he and Daxton Hill, to me, it's like there's really no difference. Like, I would be super excited with either one of those guys. So if we're going to be real picky, I'll say he's my 2B and Daxton Hill is my 2A. I love so much about what I've seen, what I've been reading, the things that I've been watching with him. I think he is as close to the level of versatility that Hamilton has. Not quite, obviously, because he's not as big as him.
Right.
He's not going to be able to, come off the edge. I think Hamilton literally could be blitzed off the edge and have some impact there. But man, the versatility is super intriguing with Daxton Hill. He could be a cornerback. He could legitimately play on outside cornerback on defense. He has good, he can turn his hips. He can run. The big negatives with him are his size, because he's just under, 195 pounds. So he's definitely on the smaller side. Yeah. The number of starts, he didn't have a ton of starts in college football. And then he just is just so aggressive. He would maybe a little bit too aggressive at times, but he does play the run even at that size, which I really like and admire. He's not afraid. And again, zone, man coverage, athleticism, versatility, they're all big check marks for Daxton Hill. And again, I'm expecting him to blow up the combine. From my reading, from my research, he could be one of the big stars of the combine. So if you pair up all of the athleticism and all the things that I just mentioned, I think he is really, really intriguing. And again, the ability to play cornerback, I think, is really intriguing. You could do some crazy S on defense with him. And then lastly, Kyle Hamilton, you know the deal. His QBR, when he's being attacked by other quarterbacks, mistakenly, of course, in 2020, it was 55.6. It improved in 2021, 42.3 QBR when being, attacked. There's really not a lot to dislike with him. He's a good tackler. He's got range, versatility. The the one thing that I thought was interesting was his tackle numbers were pretty low. And we were talking about your guy from Middle Tennessee just having a nose for the ball and finding the ball carrier and bringing him down. Hamilton doesn't have a lot of tackles on his resume. It's not really something that he's known for. Not a bad tackler. That's not really what I'm saying. Just that the tackle numbers are a little bit lower. And then I don't know if I mentioned it, and if I did, I apologize. The knee injury in his junior year. So, and again, it's a small thing. His career is not over, but just something to keep in mind. I do have a super chat from V-Man, which I greatly appreciate. He is saying, you hear Joe Judge will be de facto QB for Pats? Maybe. He is the offensive assistant for them, right? Is that his role, offensive assistant for the Pats?
Yeah, he's like some kind of assistant there. So
he's a weirdo.
Yeah, he's a weird dude, man. He wasn't ready for that yet. I mean, he maybe sometime down the line, but the way he talked just made me very uncomfortable.
Yeah. I actually respect his pizza and beer game, though. Did you see after he got fired, he had like legitimately like a bus of beer delivered to his house, and then like
Jeez.
He had like the stack of pizza pies. It was pretty crazy. There was a picture of it online after he got fired. He had pizza and beer. So pretty good stuff. All right. Thank you guys for hanging in there, watching us, listening to us talk about our safeties. If you haven't hit the like button yet, I would really appreciate it if you would hit it. And if you guys are watching and you're new, I hope you check out some of the content on the channel. There are like over 22 videos, something like that, for the off season already uploaded. And I do have 2 more coming out this weekend. Let's see if I can show them off real quick. I got free agency profiles coming out for the wide receivers. And then I also have a free agency profile, or whatever you want to call it, a preview for the tight ends. And I'm just trying to find it. Here it is. Got Mr. Dalton Schultz on there, David Njoku. So check those out. If you're not subscribed, and if you haven't, I would highly appreciate it if you check it out, because I think there's some good stuff on the channel right now. There's a lot of good videos. So, all right. Thank you very much, Blunted Vegas. Really appreciate that. Propose 2 days a week of content. Honestly, you guys get, right now, it's like 4 days, because I've been putting out 3 videos on the weekends, and then we have our live streams. So perhaps I'll run out of steam eventually and it'll slow down, but full steam ahead for me right now. All right, let's move along here. We're going to go to our film breakdown, which I'm very excited about. So guys, he doesn't do it every single week because he's a busy guy too, like me. He's got his own job that he does, and he's got his career, he's got his wife. But he does a film breakdown for us, every so often, and I really enjoy them a lot, and it seems like most people do. So we're gonna watch Jermaine Johnson II, from FSU, and formerly also of Georgia. So if you guys are excited for that, hope you guys let me know. And while we're watching the film, I do my best to keep my eye while James is talking on the chat. Whoops. I'll do my best to keep my eye on the chat. So if you see something, or if you disagree with something that James says, throw it in the chat. I will very much be watching it while he's talking. And I will pose the questions that you ask to him directly. I am not an X's and O's guy. I know some things, and I generally know what I'm looking at when I watch it, but I don't know the science behind it all. So that's what James excels at. So without any further ado, Jermaine Johnson, give us all that weird feeling in our pants that we all need right now, because this is an edge rusher that I really like.
Yeah, and we went through. Was it last week we did our top 10 edge rushers? I think it might have been last week.
Yeah, we've done the edge rushers
with Boy Green. Yep. Mm-hmm. I think I had Jermaine at 4, and then I started to kind of get deeper and deeper, and I was like, I think I'm maybe wrong. So I'm bumping him up to the 3 spot. after kind of what I've seen here. And so, and
You
for,
you agree
context
with me?
purposes,
You agree with me?
I did. I did. And for context purposes, I looked at the Clemson game, obviously, which is this clip here, Florida, Miami, and Notre Dame. So I had 4 games of film there, and he played fantastic in all of them because he had a big time year. And fun fact about Jermaine Johnson is he's a last chance you guy. I don't know if anyone watches that Netflix series of the junior college or the community college Netflix show there, and that's where Jermaine got his start. He went to Georgia after that. Didn't get as much playing time there, and wound up in Florida State, and it worked out perfectly for him. I think it was 18 or so tackles for a loss, 10 plus sacks, 11 and a half, maybe 11 and a half sacks. But here, what you really see with Jermaine Johnson, and I'll try not to just talk over a stopped, a paused video here, but this one is Clemson. And so when you look at the edge rusher, you're like, hey, we need guys that can make impact plays. He's, 6'5", just a shade under 6'5" at 260, 265. And I listened recently to the Connor Rogers new podcast on PFF, and there is maybe some rumblings that at the combine he may run in the 4.5s.
Good Lord.
So that's a big guy. He's got long arms. I think it was just a shade under 35-inch arms. So the length is there, the height is there, the weight is there. That's all there for him. And so as a talent, the traits are off the charts, and it's really just kind of getting to see what he's done. Is 16 games started as a college player at altogether, his entire college career, which isn't a ton of stuff. But ultimately here, so he is the edge rusher, the edge player at the top of the screen over the right tackle. And so he's in a 3-point stance, right? 2 feet on the ground, one hand in the dirt. He does have really good get off, which I actually, for all these clips, I put this version and then the end zone version. So if you want to run this here, we'll see. We'll go through the technique at the back end, but good get off. He's physical with the right tackle, right? And by physical, I mean he gets his hands in there and then he rips. So it not so much of a different rip, but he gets physical. He gets his hands inside. He controls the right tackle, and then ultimately rips away and gets to the quarterback. But he does more than get to the quarterback here. He's going to wind up stripping that football. He picks it up. He's going to score a touchdown.
Yes.
So that was a fun one because it's not very often you see these guys scoring touchdowns. So that had to be play number one.
Absolutely. And for the record, because somebody's asking, he is lined up at the top of the defensive line there. So he is standing in front of or rushing against the right tackle. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yep. Yeah. He's that roughly around that 5 technique or so outside the right tackle. So he's on the left side of the screen here, across from the right tackle. He's got his hand in the dirt there, right? So, I mean, his arms are a little outside. The right arm is a little outside, but ultimately he's got his head peeked into the backfield. So he's looking to see, hey, where am I going to rush here? And then he ultimately uses his strength and his length to rip down, get free of that grasp there, and get around the edge for a sack. And you could just see, I mean, he looks physically imposing, right? Like he's someone who ultimately jumps off. You're like, hey, if you didn't know who Jermaine Johnson was, ultimately the question you're going to ask yourself is, okay, well, who's number 11 there? What's his deal? Because he is a ultra athletic player. And so a lot of these are sacks, by the way, because I'm trying to get the people started here. And here, this one, same position. He's hand in the dirt, over or across from the right tackle. So he's on the bottom of the screen this time around. Another sack here, and he comes in hot, but here he's going to use that length. He's going to use that length to essentially turn around this right tackle. So they're pretty evenly matched at this point in time, right? And with Jermaine's length, he is often to have his hands first, right? He kind of initiates that contact, which gives him the control to be able to, use that hand work to get free and get to the quarterback. So here, actually, he uses essentially it's a bit of a long arm where he gets his right arm on top of the left shoulder of the right tackle, and he actually spins him around. The right tackle gets spun around. Right at one point, his back is actually facing Jermaine Johnson. He's got to turn around and figure out where he's at. At that point, it's too late, and the quarterback is in a whole heck of a lot of trouble, and he basically drops him. And again, he forces the fumble, right? He's getting his hands on the football. He's making those impact plays. And so I have this one also from the back end view here.
That's something that we don't talk a lot about. Like pass rushing and getting sacks are all great. You really need to get that ball out. Like that's what the best pass rushers do, is they are going after the ball in a lot of cases. Not always, because you don't have a good angle. Because you don't have a good angle.
Right.
But if you have the opportunity, you got to get that damn ball out. So I've seen it now 2 plays in a row, so I like that. I'll let you keep going.
Yeah, and this game he had 3 sacks in this Miami game here. But you can see, right, that ability to turn the speed into power, right? And the power comes from the arms, the length, also his lower body. He explodes out, and he gives that power move where it looked like it was going to kind of be a bull rush almost, but he's able to use his length for the long arm to spin that right tackle around. Now, ultimately, right, I do these film reviews, and yeah, sure, here and there I'll pick out plays and I'll say, all right, well, that wasn't very good. But ultimately, when you're drafting, you're trying to project here also. What's this guy look like? I hear a lot of guys say, well, if I took this guy's best 5 or 10 plays, it's going to be better than most guys, right? And you're looking at the traits, especially at the edge position, right? You got to get that physically imposing athlete, that burst, that explosiveness. The length is there. I think the length for us is important. For every edge rusher is important, but if you turn on the tape, this isn't what he is every single snap on the pass rush. That's just, what it's going to be. There are plays, right, where he gets maybe stifled by a right tackle, or his hand technique isn't the best. But ultimately, when it's dominant, and that's kind of what you see here. And so I liked this play a lot. Now, this is another sack against Miami. I liked this one here because on the way, and now he's not in a 3-point stance, so he's standing up here, which I saw him do not often, but he did do it here and there. If he's going to pin his ears back and go, he will get in that 2-point stance, which I think is fine, ultimately because of his size as well. It's not like he's a 240-pound guy and he's going to be standing up and et cetera. He can't put his hand in the dirt and create that power. So here, the way he really gets around is with his footwork. He gives an inside step on his way around the right tackle. He gives an inside step, which kind of makes the right tackle kind of pause for just a second, and that gives Jermaine Johnson the ability to get around the edge and get to the quarterback at this point in time. So if you run it there, John, It's going to be hard to see at this point. But he gives a little bit of a 2-way go. It's kind of a wide receiver term, but he gives a step inside and then he gets around. You could see at that point in time, right there, he had the right tackle beat, almost essentially off the snap. At this point in time, he's beat. He's not even with the right tackle. So he uses his speed, his explosiveness, which he has to get around this right tackle here. And I do have the end zone view for this one as well.
We got a couple of questions regarding some plays and regarding JJ. I'll let this play. But Kev Chadda is. I love the hands. He's using his hands there really nicely.
It's a nice swipe, right? He's got the right tackle and a little bit of a quicksand with the the footwork move. And then when he's in the quicksand, all he does is, he's swiping those hands down so that he can get around the edge. So yeah, that's really impressive because the hand technique, is something that's important. And I think that's something that a lot of guys end up learning also. It's not, maybe there are some guys that come in with that elite hand, ability. But ultimately, those guys also, you got to be able to coach these guys up especially when they have traits like a Jermaine Johnson.
Okay, cool. And I agree. I think that he does have some decent hand moves. Let's go to Kev Chatta. He says, if JJ blows up the combine, would you choose JJ or would you consider choosing JJ over Ekwonu at 4?
Yeah, so I had this question yesterday over Twitter because I had tweeted that I finished up the film on him and someone asked me, are you comfortable with taking him at 4? And I think my answer was in the right circumstance, yeah, I would. I would take him at 4 in the right circumstance, and the circumstance is if we struck out right at edge, whether that's free agency, we know we're going to need this spot to be addressed at 4 or 10. And if Ekwonu goes 1, Hutchinson and Thibodeau go 2 and 3, yeah, I think you can put a Jermaine Johnson in that category of he's a top 10 talent. I think, in my opinion, based on the traits, right? If he's there at 10 and we haven't addressed edge, I think that it would be an excellent pick. And so, yeah, at pick 4, you run the risk of maybe he's not there at 10. Maybe in Atlanta at 8, or a Carolina pairs him up with a Brian Burns type of deal there at 6 or something like that. I would if we took him at 4, I won't. I'm assuming that says won't even watch football no more. Yeah, I mean, listen, that's fine. That's cool, but yeah, I mean, listen, he's gonna wind up. He's already rising, right? I mean, we talked about him, I feel like, in the beginning, at the end of the college football season of, oh, hey, yeah, listen, this guy Jermaine Johnson, we could maybe take him at 35 in these mock drafts that we're doing. Yes. And then all of a sudden, he's down in the 20s, and then he's down in the mid-teens. And then Daniel Jeremiah 2 days ago has him going 9th overall. So I think he's a player that over time, at the combine, the meetings, and I think some other things that we'll see here also do make him, a top tier talent here in this draft that the Jets could definitely use in their scheme.
Yeah, and I put that comment up because he's not the only one. There are people who are pretty adamant that he does not belong in the top 10. I really like the idea of taking him at 10. I think that, I am projecting that he's going to have a pretty doggone good combine, and he already had a really good showing at the Senior Bowl. So I don't know, man. I feel like if his stock is climbing and he projects, because that's the other thing, you're not just looking at the film, you're not just looking at the combine, you're also trying to project what they'll be at the NFL level. And I think that he's got a shot to be a really good edge rusher, man. And it's a risk. Every pick in the draft is a risk. Kyle Hamilton, consensus #1 safety in the draft. It's a risk taking any of these guys. None of them are guaranteed to be great football players. So it's hard to say. There are people in the chat suggesting that Carl Loftus is the better edge rusher. And there's certainly an argument that could be made.
Oh, absolutely.
And I think that's what I would like to emphasize. I have JJ at 3 as far as the edge rushers go. But if you said to me that Carl Loftus should be 3, I mean, I'm willing to listen and have that conversation for sure. And that's the other thing. Kev Chatta, he's kind of agreeing with us. There's a chance he might not even make it to 10. This kind of is reminiscent of, the wide receiver discussion. Everybody's kind of got their own take here. And so I think it's just really important as fans, we realize that there's more than one view. There's more than there's two sides to every coin, I guess is the expression I'm looking for here.
Yeah, and you're exactly right, because it is projection, right? I mean, we're sitting here, we're trying to figure out who we're going to take at 4 and 10 because we think they're going to be, surefire all-pro players that are available because the talent's through the roof. And, we may look 2 years down the line and say, holy crap, how did we not see it in this player who went in the fourth round? How did we, there's always that kind of, the Devontae Adams, the Alvin Kamara that falls to the third round, or the Stephon Diggs that's sitting there, I think in the fourth or the fifth round. It's all a project, and that's kind of what I'm learning as I'm doing more draft stuff too. Is I'm sitting there yesterday looking at this tweet of would I take him at 4, and I'm like drafting 4 to 5 different tweets before I actually send it, and I'm like, you know what? Like, why am I gonna beat around the bush? Like, it's all opinion, right? We're trying to project what these guys are, so why not just stand firm and say, hey, listen, I think he's a top talent. That's what I think. Does he need work? Absolutely, but that's going to be true for all of these guys. You got to hope that the coaching staff picks up what he has and can turn him into, the elite player that he has the potential to be. And so this one here is where I wanted to get into a little bit of a motor type of aspect that he has to his game. Motor being he's a relentless player. He is, and not just on the sacks, in the run game, in the pass game, in the screen game. He's constantly running in the field until that whistle is blown, until the receiver or the running back, the ball carrier, is on the ground. That's just how he plays. So he fits the model of, hey, if we're really going to be about this all gas, no break type of mentality here, and this is the player we're looking for, they're going to, the Douglas and the guys, they're going to turn on this tape and say, okay, well, he didn't make the play here, but he's 15 yards down the field. Or, hey, he made a play on the complete opposite side, which I brought here. So this one here is just it's a sack. I don't want to say it's simple. But ultimately, he gets the path to the quarterback, and he fights through with this right tackle. He's at the top of the defensive line. He does give that little stutter move again, but he does right here. He gets a little bit of stifled, right? He's a little bit stifled at this point. The right tackle meets him. They're even. But ultimately, if this quarterback's going to sit back there, he's going to keep that motor going. He's going to be not a little bit. He is relentless. And he's ultimately going to get there for the big play. So there's nothing crazy in how he does it, but these are plays that ultimately matter too. And the fact that he could just also, stick that left arm out there and corral the quarterback, that kind of stuff is something you look at and say, okay, you may see that on someone else's film, right? You may see it elsewhere. Players are going to make that play there, but when you wind up combining it with the traits and the dominant plays, you say, okay, this is a player who is not going to be, when you watch him on tape, he's not kind of a flash in the pan, where you watch him and he gets this sack and then he falls into a couple others. There are the dominant reps that also come along with the relentless nature of his game, which I really enjoyed throughout the process. So this one here, yeah, he gets a little bit. I mean, we can get into technique there actually, because if you rewind it a little bit, John, when the quarterback's kind of sitting there in the pocket, right? I mean, if you're looking from a quarterback perspective, when you're looking to the right side of the field at the snap, you're more likely than not going to want to, you're going to want to step up in the pocket, especially if it's a long progression for you. Maybe you're waiting for a route to develop. He maybe wanted to step up in the pocket a little bit here. He gave Jermaine Johnson a path, right? He just said, hey, listen, I'm going to sit at the 40-yard line there. And if you just continue to rush, you're going to fall right into me. But for Jermaine there, you want to see him attack that outside shoulder, right? Especially if he's going to go around the edge, attack that outside shoulder, because ultimately he has the strength to turn the right tackle, or the tackle if he's on, the left tackle if he's on the other side of the field, and he ultimately gets there for the sack. So attacking that outside shoulder is also important in the pass rush game. So really, those were the sacks that I picked out, because I can't go through all 11 and a half there, but you saw it with the long arm and the strength. You saw it with the quick little move the inside move to kind of stifle the right tackle and then get around him. And then you saw, ultimately the power and the speed to get around the edge and the relentlessness to get to the quarterback. Now, the underrated, or maybe not underrated, but maybe the best part about his game is this dude is unbelievable against the run.
Good, because somebody was asking about that earlier. They were like, "How is he against the run?"
No, yeah, he is, I mean, phenomenal. He stops just about everything. When I say everything, that was the most consistent part of his game, was if they ran to his side, he was making the play. And so I picked one play here from Notre Dame in the run game. Now this game he did have quite a few tackles. I think he only had one sack and only, but he had one sack in the game. But I didn't pick that one because it was not as I don't want to say as flashy, but kind of one of those where it kind of fell into his lap a little bit. But in the run game against Notre Dame, he blew it up all day long. And so he is at the bottom of the screen again against the right tackle. And what Notre Dame winds up doing, now this is 3rd and 2. So this is a short yardage play. We're going kind of mano-y-mano here. And they are going to wind up Notre Dame motioning the tight end over to Jermaine Johnson's side. Now, the interesting part about Jermaine Johnson's game, which I had to get some advice on this because I actually hadn't really seen it that much. I talked to Joe Blewett over at Jets X Factor. We had a little conversation about it, is whenever a tight end wound up lined up against Jermaine Johnson, and so we have a tackle and a tight end, and it's Jermaine Johnson, he shifted his stance into a little bit of a soft stance, meaning he was going to take his hand out of the ground and play a 2-point stance, almost like he's a linebacker, almost like he's a middle linebacker. So once that tight end came over, he immediately took his hand out of the ground. And I'm like, man, he's doing this on every single play. And I'm like trying to Google it, and I don't even know what kind of search terms to put, because really, sometimes that doesn't affect guys. If they have their hand in the dirt, they have their hand in the dirt. If not, then they don't. And this was a consistent part of his game. And so I had to get some advice there. And, kind of one of the points that Joe made was it gives him better vision, right? He's not, hand in the dirt, has to get up and then see what the blocking scheme is that comes toward him. He's kind of just waiting to see what's going to come. If it's a double team, if the tight end goes out, and then he does have the explosiveness and the athletic ability, if it's, not a double team, or if it's going to be a passing down, to be able to turn it into, a potential pressure and the pass rush. But if this is, it is 3rd and 2. He's gonna get up and be in that soft stance, and it's really gonna help him vision wise to see what he's about to see scheme blocking wise.
And he just pops that tackle.
Right. So it's an inside run. He does see the double team. I mean, the tight end winds up trying to go out to the linebacker, but he takes on that tackle and he blows this up. And this is not an uncommon situation that happened. This isn't, oh, hey, we found one run against Notre Dame where he blew up. I mean, he had 18 and a half tackles for a loss, which was up there with the best in the country. And he's on the left-hand side right here. And you'll see when the tight end comes over, he takes his hand out of the dirt. He's able to read the blocking that he's getting. He blows up the double team and ultimately just stifles the running back for a 3rd and 2 stop, and it becomes 4th down.
Awesome stuff. I want to watch this from this angle.
Yeah, it's a pretty good. He gets help from the other side, but this is all. See, he gets up, he takes on those blocks, and then he just blows up the running back for a big time stop in a game that they needed a lot of help on defense.
Kev Chatta says, let's have Lawson and JJ toughen Becton up this summer.
Yeah.
I love the idea of that for sure. I will never stop screaming for pass rushers. All right. We are on to this play versus Miami. Is that Miami?
That is Miami. So this is where we get to, right, the freakish traits. This is another run stop, except at the bottom of your screen, you're going to see whether he's a wide receiver or running back. I'm not entirely sure, but a skilled player is going to motion across the formation and ultimately get the jet sweep from the quarterback. Now, Jermaine Johnson is in the same spot that he's been in, across from the right tackle. This right tackle just blows by him, most likely because you're expecting your running back / wide receiver to be able to outrun the defensive end, which maybe some of them he can. But for Jermaine Johnson, he explodes out of his stance. He sees this and he just runs this. He runs this down, maybe a gain of 1 or maybe, this is a loss of 6 or a loss of 5. And so he's able to make plays like that in the run game, which really just show off the athleticism. He reads it. That was, and kind of the other thing about him in the run game is, those read option plays, right? The read, I don't want to call them read option play, the run reads, where it's either going to be the quarterback or it's going to be the running back, but you're going to leave somebody unblocked because he's the read player, right? So if he attacks down the line of scrimmage, the quarterback will keep it. If he attacks the mesh point between the running back and the quarterback, the quarterback's more likely than not going to hand it off to the running back. He's the read. And so Jermaine Johnson was in a lot of those situations at Florida State. And there were plays where he was dead stopped. He made the quarterback kind of second guess. And once the quarterback handed it off, he stopped him for either a loss of 1 or no gain. And he was able to really get himself down the line of scrimmage really quick. And there were a couple plays where he just kind of attacked the mesh point and the quarterback didn't even make a decision at all. He had no time to. And so here, when you're looking at Jermaine Johnson, he's going to run this guy down and make the tackle. And he did that quite often, a sideline to sideline type of player. So go ahead, John. We're going to say something.
It's okay. Yeah, I just wanted to say, because I've watched a couple of Joe Blewett's breakdown of Thibodeau, and there were some instances where he showed maybe poor, gap play or run fit, whatever you want to call it, where Thibodeau would kind of come crashing down and it would just leave a huge rushing lane. And it's kind of nice to see on that last play specifically, he doesn't ever lose a sense of where he's supposed to be, even though there's a lot going on in the backfield, and plays it perfectly. I mean, the tackle is nice, but even if he just kind of gets in the way and slows that guy down, that's also him doing his job. That's my takeaway from it. Just something that I thought of, and I wanted to answer Anthony Coleman here. Both James and I agree 100%. And, we're talking about JJ right now. We're not blind to the fact that, Kayvon Thibodeau is the better prospect, and we would prefer him over JJ. So we do not disagree with you. All righty. Last play, maybe?
This is the last one. And this is just, I get geeked out over hustle plays. Because these guys have all the talent in the world. Most of them, they're the top 0.1% of what, athletes in the world, basically. And when you're looking at these guys, some of them have the, maybe the tendency to slack here and there. And I mentioned it before about how he's an all gas, no break type of player. John, if you could rewind it for maybe a couple seconds, I just want to get to the scoreboard here. So context for this play, and I don't know why I get so excited about it, but I do, just because it matters. When you're sitting there at home on your couch and you're hoping that your team and the players fight for every inch that they can. Florida State's down by 5 in this game. They're down 28-23. It's 3rd and 4. 2 minutes and 36 seconds left. You have to make a stop here, or you risk. I think they were up. I think Florida State was up 17-0 in this game and wound up blowing the lead at this point in time. But you have a chance on this play here to force 4th down, get a punt, get the ball back, and potentially win the game. So 3rd and 4, and he doesn't make the play all by himself, but I just want to show you the effort level that he's going to give. Now he's in a 2-point stance, stand-up rusher right here across from the right tackle. Now, the offense is just going to throw the ball in the flat to the tight end that's on the opposite side of Jermaine Johnson. And he gets the ball in the flat, and John, you can run it here.
Sure.
He gets the ball in the flat. Now, there was a little bit of a pick instance, right? And pick, I just mean, they're trying to get in the way of those defensive backs there. Now this tight end breaks that first tackle, and he's going to wind up in almost a one-on-one situation. And you can see on your screen,
yes,
JJ is kind of barreling down here,
Ooh.
and he comes in there hot, and he stops them. It's about 1.5 yards short of the first down. He comes from, you see he's running that thing down, and he makes that play. It's the effort level that was consistent on every single play that I watched. He did not take any snaps off, and in the biggest spot in the game, first of all, he kind of, I don't know how much that right tackle's trying. He knows it's probably going to be a pass. But he probably has no idea there that JJ is going to kind of come in and, hey, listen, that tight end was moving forward. If he winds up getting that extra 1.5 yards, the game is over. Ultimately, they stop him on 4th down. It is a punt by Miami. Florida State gets the ball back. They score a touchdown, and Florida State wins the ball game. So little things like that. I know it's not, hey, maybe there's a guy that can make that play and that always has the effort level. But when you match up that kind of skill and those traits with a guy who's willing to play that hard every single snap, it's the makings of a special player that the Jets, I think, and John, I think you would agree, are trying to put into this building here. To be difference makers on the field. And if edge is a spot that we need, and listen, if he's there at 10 and we have no answer for the edge in free agency, I think he's the pick, because we do have to address it. And if you can get if you go, I don't know, I'll just, tickle my fantasy there for, if we're like, hey, we need to address this defense, we went out, we traded for the big time wide receiver, et cetera. We'll talk about maybe some free agents here, but we get a Sauce at 4, and we need to address that edge, and we go with a guy like Jermaine Johnson at 10. I think he's worthy of the pick. There are guys at Jets X Factor that, and Andrew, I don't know if you know Andrew Golden.
I've seen him on Twitter.
We had a conversation about Jermaine Johnson this weekend, and he basically said, I'm picking him at 4 and I'm never looking back. That was his exact comment. I don't know if I'm there totally, no matter what, but I think there is a circumstance where I think he's absolutely a top 10 player in this draft. So it was a fun one for me to look at.
You messaged me. You were watching the film and you messaged me during the week. You were like, JJ, holy moly.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm excited about him, and where he goes is going to be really interesting. Anthony Coleman, he tends to disagree with, the prospect of where he's going to go, and I do hope you realize that's not a big deal to us. Like, we appreciate the disagreement. Like, that's, and I hope everybody understands that at this point. The channel's been around for over a year now. Disagreements are the lifeblood of sports. I've been saying that for a long time. Like, that is why we enjoy them so much, is because of the debate that comes from it. So please feel no way about the fact that we don't see eye to eye on this one. It's not a big deal. So
for sure.
All right, good stuff. Jets Marvel has a quick question. He says, would you rather JD double dip on offense or on defense? And it's funny that that's in there, because a lot of people are talking in the chat about, we all want to have a good defense, we all want to have a good offense, but they're all kind of saying similar things, like, this is an offense driven league, why can't we be a part of that? The Jets have been known, and it's fair, it's actually
it's a good point.
The Jets have had, they've been known for defense for quite a while, even in years where we maybe weren't as good. Our defense was still decent. Time for our offense to step up. So I think it's a pretty good question to throw in there about the double dipping. And I think he's referring to 4 and 10. What would you rather? I know what you're going to say, and I'm going to support you on this one. So what would you rather double dip on? at 4 and 10?
Oof. I think I would rather double dip on defense.
Yeah.
And the reason being is, and I think we spoke about this before too. The offensive line, I get it. We need to build the offensive line, to a point where we can protect Zach. I think there are different ways we can go about that. I'm a huge Daniel Jeremiah fan. I kind of take him by Bible almost, what he kind of says. He had some interesting points today about the offensive line. I don't know if you saw them at all.
I saw them and I quote tweeted it because I have been screaming about it, and you know that already. Go ahead.
Oh yeah, and listen, to build a good to a really good offensive line, it doesn't need to be 4 first-round picks. And he is right. I mean, he is right in the sense that there are ways to, and just like every other position, I get that part, but offensive line, you can go through and spend the money in the free agency to get that guard. We have the tackles, I think, in line, as long as Becton gets his stuff together. Connor McGovern's going to be the center. Elijah Vera Tucker's going to be the left guard. If you can get the Austin Corbett, the Laken Tomlinson, the James Daniels that we talk about, and play right guard, we have a really nice offensive line set up in front of Zach there. If Morgan Moses comes back and we have George Fant still and we have some depth for injury purposes, my main thing is I need to get playmakers, right? And by playmakers, I need to get guys who can make big impact plays and big moments of the game. That's your edge rusher that can make the strip sack. That's your strip sack or pressure on the quarterback, etc. And then also somebody in the secondary that can get their hands on the football. And I think for me, that guy is Sauce Gardner. He can make a big difference. He's the guy that can push Bryce Hall to be that number 2 corner, and he would be a damn good one at that. And so I think if you double dip on offense, it has to be an offensive lineman and then a skill player. And I just think we're going to see Joe Douglas address the offensive line in a different fashion than the last 2 years or so with picks in the first round.
So you're double dipping on defense. Did you want to add something else?
Yeah, just a quick point. I think I saw, I can't confirm it, but I think Ashton Davis is Joe Douglas's highest graded, highest drafted defender. I know it's only been two drafts, but he went 4 offensive players last draft right in a row. At some point, I think they're going to turn the page and say, hey, listen, we got to infuse some talent on this side. So I think there is the edge corner combination that can happen at 4 and 10.
So I'll try to go and summarize what you said. And I do kind of agree. I still stand on the idea that I would like them to kind of split it up and go offense and defense in round 1. But if you're making me choose right now, I would probably say double dip defense. And the reason's kind of simple. The better players in round 1 right now are defensive players, especially near the top. Like that's where the talent is. So Michael N is saying, so if you guys think double dipping on defense is the way to go, why not use the 4 pick on Hamilton? It seems to me he's going to make his team very happy. I just think we have too many other needs. We are saying double dip defense, and I would imagine that, if we do go double dip offense, I don't think that James or I are going to be crying at all. We do believe in the idea of building around the young quarterback, and there are videos on the channel that talk about it. We've been talking about it throughout the offseason so far. It definitely needs to be of high priority. So you asked the question, or somebody asked the question about, it was Jets Marvel. Which would we do? And I think, again, the value in the draft early is in the defense. But again, if we go double dip, if we go Ikem Ekwonu and Wilson, or Ekwonu and Traylon Burks or London, like, we're good. We are good with that, I would imagine. So, all right, let's move along here. Let's go to, and I think we may have to make this our last topic of the night. We typically do a 3-round mock, but I don't know if we'll have time for that one. But we'll see. I want to go ahead and talk just a little bit about free agency. We're still 2 weeks away, so maybe not a huge breakdown tonight. We'll we'll have an exclusive free agency stream, maybe not next week, but the week after that, because then it's like free agency is like right around the corner. So I did a mock off season, and I've been spending more time thinking about it. I just want to know, like, offhand, like, who are the guys that you really think should be brought in? Like, we've talked about guys that we would like, and we talk about guys that would be good fits. But, like, if you were in charge, quite literally, the general manager of the Jets, who would you who would you give the money to, and who would you want signing on that dotted line? That's the question that I'm posing. And guys in the chat, and gals, because we had a girl earlier on she was in the chat. Throw in what you would like. Who would you be spending the money on? That's really the short and skinny of it. And you can name a couple of players. I have a few on my short list. It's all you, James.
Cool. All right. So I'll get the two big fish out of the way, because I feel like we talk about them a lot, because I do have a couple other names on this list here. But obviously Marcus Williams is my one. Dalton Schultz is up there as well. Just for anybody wondering, the Jets in 2021 had 75 tight end targets, 50 catches for 530 yards, 3 touchdowns, and 8 drops. That's
awful.
The number.
I'm playing the Price is Wrong sound effect right now.
Yeah, that's inexcusable. So yeah, Dalton Schultz. I think we're all kind of on edge in a sense to make sure he doesn't get tagged. But if he doesn't, he's at the top of the list. What I would like to add on offense, and I'm kind of going against my age limit here that I once had. How about Cordarrelle Patterson as a Swiss Army knife, who I think Mike LaFleur would have a lot of fun with in this offense here. And he could play the running back. You could put him in the slot, wide receiver, et cetera. He could do everything. And, if we don't wind up with a guy like, if we don't wind up with Braxton Berrios, he has that kick return, that punt return ability also. So he could just do a whole lot of stuff. And I saw a contract projection for him of like 2 for 12, which I think is doable for what we can use. And I think Zach would benefit from having him there.
Can also play running back too.
Tight end, if we don't wind up with a Dalton Schultz that I recently kind of got a little persuaded by. And this isn't to say he would be our tight end one. I know a lot of people, they saw the Jets X Factor article by David Wyatt Humpton. I think I'm saying his last name correct. Sorry, David. But he wrote an article pretty recently about Max Williams at the tight end spot as a depth piece there, because his run blocking ability is the top. It's potentially top. He was over a 70 run blocking grade every year that he's been in the NFL, and David mentions that a 70 would essentially make it good for a top 15 tight end grade in the run blocking scheme every single year. So if that's your 2, and then, the Jets fans get their wish of a McBride in the second round, and that's the combination, that's super intriguing.
David needs to step his game up. I already knew that because I play a lot of Madden.
There you go.
Max Williams is one of the best blocking tight ends in the league.
Well, I got to add that to my Madden team then, because
he can block.
And then Laken Tomlinson is up there for me too. I saw a contract projection for him of a 3 for 27 because he is 29 years old. But for him, obviously the scheme fit. He's familiar with Mike LaFleur, and also he's played 1,000+ snaps every year he's been in the NFL. So he is relatively healthy in that regard. And I'll throw two more names out there and then I'll shut up.
That's all right.
One name I kind of am intrigued by because it's potentially a low cost cornerback option that we can add to the room is Dante Jackson from Carolina.
Yep.
I really liked him coming out of LSU, and it doesn't look like he will re-sign with Carolina.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. He's
No,
super athletic. A lot of athleticism there.
A super freak athletically. I mean, I had his 40 time at the combine was a 4.32, so he's a borderline, sub 4.3 guy essentially, which is super rare. The vertical is ridiculous, and he's at his best in zone coverage, which is pretty interesting because that's kind of what we are trying to do here. And 12 interceptions over 4 years. He missed some time this year, but they just drafted J.C. Horn 8th overall last year and then traded for Stephon Gilmore. So if Dante Jackson isn't in the plans, I saw a contract projection for him of two years, $10 million. That's something that could be doable to add him to the room. And see what you could get out of him. He's only 26 years old. And then the last guy I'll throw out there to kind of beef up this defensive interior of the line at a potentially low cost, maybe a risk, but Jaron Reed, defensive tackle from Kansas City. He spent a whole bunch of time in Seattle, 6'3", 310 pounds or so. So he'd be on that interior. But it was in 2018 that he had 12 tackles for a loss, 10.5 sacks, 24 quarterback hits. Those numbers obviously dropped and he winded up on KC. But you look at a veteran with playoff experience, big game experience, start adding that type of player to the room. And so Jaron Reed at a potentially smaller there you go, Anthony Coleman. Did Anthony Coleman just agree with us?
Well, that's
Anthony,
the thing.
welcome.
I'm like literally squeezing to get this comment in because I think he was considering like not watching any longer. He was like, this show sucks. Like, what the hell is wrong with these two kids? Anthony, he's agreeing with what you're saying. He loves what you're talking about with the free agency additions. Yeah, and Jets Central made a video talking about cornerbacks, I think, for the free agency, and he had Dante on that list. I'm definitely on board for Dante being on this squad. Just depends on the price, though, but I'd be willing to cough up some money. Cornerback's a pretty important position for sure. We definitely could use an upgrade, too. I think that's fair to say. All right, I'll give a few names here. If you've been watching the videos, unfortunately, there are a lot of the same names that I've been mentioning. But I'm going to go ahead and say that for whatever reason, I've got a gut feeling. I want Dalton Schultz if he's available. I don't know if it's going to happen. I don't know if there's a lot of factors. I don't know if he's going to want to play for us. And the other thing I'm wondering is JD going to pony up? Because right now, I mean, my guess would be anywhere from 10 to 13 mil per year, right? Like in that range somewhere. Mm-hmm. And I just don't know. I mean, maybe he will, and maybe he'll surprise us all and he'll go super aggressive and go get a tight end 1, but I'm not sure that he'll do it. David Njoku is a name that I've been talking about. So I think a lot of people are like, oh, he's a bust. Like he's Chris Herndon. He offers way more athleticism and way more upside in the receiving game. I think every season that he's played, he's averaged over 11 yards per reception, which is pretty good. Some tight ends, they float around that, 10 yards per reception average. And he's kind of, he's over that number in most seasons. So the receiving ability is there. He's super athletic. And the thing with Njoku that is often not understood is he's actually a good blocker. Now, he's not a Max Williams. Let's not get it twisted. He ain't no Max Williams. But in all seriousness, he in his, I think it was 2020, where he was ready to basically just I have to get out of Cleveland. I don't want to be here. You guys signed Austin Hooper. You don't want me. He requested a trade. And they said, no, you're going to stay here. And from everything that I read, that was his best season blocking wise, and he was one of the better blockers in the NFL that year, based on the analytics that I found. So even if you're telling me that he's not a great receiving option necessarily, I'm interested in him for his youth, his athleticism, and for his ability to be a decent, at least an average blocker. And I just think that move makes a lot of sense. So let's see here. Did anybody hate my Njoku one? Okay, so he's saying, yeah, Njoku is definitely better. I mean, I'm not saying like he is a stalwart at the position, but I think that that's a low risk, high reward type of move. Let's see here. Yeah, good second option. And that's how I view him. I think that if we're going to miss out on Schultz, I think I like the fallback plan of, going to get Njoku. The other name that, Vern already threw in there, and spoiler alert, he will be in the tight end free agent video that I made. Gerald Everett is a guy in the last 3 seasons has had 400 or more yards. So 3 years back to back to back. Again, you're not sitting there saying, holy cow, he's the number 1 tight end. Like he's going to be a stud for us. But he's got production, and the production is almost the same as what our whole tight end group had last year by himself. So he wouldn't cost all that much. His problem, in my opinion, is he's undersized and he's not a terrible blocker, but I don't think he's like all that great. He's 6'3", 240 pounds. So he's not going to be necessarily bullying people in the running game. Laken Tomlinson, you threw in there. I'm going big bucks, and I would spend quite a bit of money on James Daniels if he were available. The money I would be willing to spend quite a bit. And young, I already went over it all. Scheme fit would help stabilize the offensive line. That would be my big spend. If I'm going to spend money on anything, it's going to be guard. I really would like that to be the case. Xavier Woods, the safety from the Minnesota Vikings, he was quite good this past season, made a lot of plays, created turnovers. We certainly need that in the back end. I don't think it would break the bank. Marcus Williams is a big signing, and if we go and get him, absolutely, I'm on board with it. But you're going to save a lot of money going after Xavier Woods. He's still pretty young. So I would go after Xavier Woods. And then the name that I've thrown out that people are poo-pooing is Foye Oluokun. Apparently not all that great in pass defense. Yeah. Kind of reminds me of what we were reading about Jared Davis when we signed him. But he makes a lot of plays, and he does create turnovers. And when I think of our defense and our linebacking crew, that wasn't really a thing. That was not part of our defense last year. So I'm swinging for Oluokun in the hopes that, again, he's still pretty young, like 27 years old or something like that. Familiarity with Ulbrich, familiarity with the scheme. So I'm going after him as well. Wide receiver there's a lot of interesting names, and they are risky. There's a lot of risk with these wide receivers. And again, I'm spoiling a little bit of the video, but hopefully you'll still watch it. DJ Chark is the guy that people talk about. He's coming off of an injury. Chris Godwin's a dude that a lot of people are interested in. He got a knee injury in December. That's not a reason to not sign him, but it's just a factor. Allen Robinson was basically ignored in Chicago this past season. They just refused to throw him the football. And he had a really, really poor year in regards to production. So he's a bit of a risk, but also high upside as well. I am going to go and get a wide receiver somewhere in free agency. You can't get out of free agency and not add somebody. If I had to pick one right this moment, I would say probably try and go get Allen Robinson, because he can play in the slot. He can play on the outside, big bodied guy. And I don't think he's going to be looking for that long-term contract because of the poor season that he had this past year. I think he's going to want another 1-year deal. And ultimately, if you sign Allen Robinson and you draft a wide receiver, that gives Elijah Moore another year in this offense to get his stuff together. It gives a rookie another year time. If we draft somebody early, it gives them another year of time to develop. So Allen Robinson is intriguing to me. I'm going to throw one more name out there, and it's one that people typically don't like when I mention it. I think Christian Kirk might be on the radar. I do. I think he might be. So he's not a wide receiver 1.
No.
And probably like at best, he's a wide receiver 2. He had just under 1,000 yards this past year. He's kind of been improving over the first 4 years of his career, but he's super young. He's like 25 years old. He can play slot. He can play on the outside, and he's just a decent wide receiver. And I agree, Colton. Nothing spectacular necessarily, but my thinking is that he is young and can develop with Zach. So if you're not getting an Allen Robinson type, I like the idea of bringing in Christian Kirk because he can stay and play. He's not going to be here for just 1 year and then see you later.
Right.
That's the one drawback with guys like DJ Chark, Allen Robinson. I think they're going to only want a 1-year contract. And then you're looking at a situation where we're just constantly reshuffling the deck at wide receiver, and I don't really love that. And so if you guys hate the idea of Christian Kirk, I'm with you, and I completely agree. And I think I said that when I was talking about him. He is not a number 1 guy. And so if we did go get a Christian Kirk, you got to go and draft somebody pretty early in the NFL draft. Go get a London, go get a Burks, go get a Wilson, whatever your flavor is. But yeah, just keep adding players that are young, talented, to help this team get going. And I agree, this is another thing that's fair to say. We don't have to always sign young guys. And when you mentioned the older player, Zach Ertz could technically be in play. That's another tight end that's older, that's 32 years old this upcoming season. He played good last year. 750 yards, 75 receptions. I'm okay with that. And again, if it's just for 1 year and we're like, we couldn't sign Dalton Schultz or for whatever reason, I'm totally fine with at least bringing somebody in like that and then drafting a tight end early as well. That's a nice tight end room there. You got your Zach Ertz, your veteran. You got your young guy that's been waiting in the wings, and McBride, Ruckert, whoever your flavor is. So, yeah, those are some of my targets. This was a very rushed free agency, and we will break it down much, much more. And actually, I will be mean to whoever my co-hosts are that night, and I'll say you have to throw out contract money. What you're paying them, what kind of, I know that's going to be gross, but I guess the idea here is I don't want to just throw names out there. I would like to make it kind of like a prediction of what we think will happen.
Right.
And then that way we can circle back and make fun of ourselves about how wrong we are, basically. All right. I think that's going to do it. It is getting late and I do have to go to work tomorrow morning. So no mock draft tonight, which is a total bummer, but we will probably start the show with a mock draft next week to make up for it. Thank you, everybody. Lots of comments, lots of likes. This is the most likes I think any stream's ever gotten during the stream. So really, really appreciate you all tuning in. Thank you to everybody. I mean, you've been here the whole time, Blunted Vegas. If you're sitting here 2 hours and 20 minutes after the stream started, you are a true NYJ Today supporter and really appreciate it. Don't forget to check out the content for back shoulder breakdowns, guys. Follow him on Twitter. He does post some of his, some of his things that he's posting. He also has YouTube content out there. He has a Ahmad Sauce Gardner breakdown. I need to actually, James, I was going to tell you, I need to get your links to your videos. You can give me those and I'll throw them in the description of our stream so people can find those. Cause I don't want it to just be about me. I want you, cause you're a big part of the channel now. So I want you to be able to showcase your stuff as well.
For sure. Thank you.
Yes, absolutely. All right, guys, that's going to be it. Episode 43 is in the books. See you guys for next week. I think there's going to be a special guest next week. I'm not confirmed yet, but it's looking pretty promising.
Cool.
Thank you very much, everybody. Hope you all have a good night. Go Jets. See you guys next time. Word from my daughter. Peace.